On today's show, Hamas, Gaza, Netanyahu, Mamdani, Cuomo, hatred and intolerance. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. I'm coming to you from New York City, where disgraced former governor, that's not the right one. Here we go. There we go. Where disgraced former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, announced he's running in November for mayor, despite Zohran Mamdani beating him by 12 percentage points in last month's New York City Democratic primary. But Cuomo thinks he has a chance. According to the New York Times, 6 out of every 7 voters in New York City are Democrats. Normally, that means if you win June's Democratic primary, you're automatically winning November's general election. 33-year-old Mamdani, a Democratic socialist, is running in a city suffocated by the billionaire class. And voters know this. They love him. But some voters are easily scared, and Republicans are already calling Mamdani a communist who will seize private property while launching a global intifada, all because he promises a partial rent freeze, universal child care, free bus fare, and city-owned grocery stores to bring down the cost of food. As Florida Republican Congressman Randy Fine so eloquently put it, Mamdani is a Muslim terrorist. Seriously, that's what Congressman Randy Fine just said about Mamdani. You know, the great thing about Republicans is they're not only against democracy, but they are the most convincing argument against it. Obviously, Republicans and mainstream Democrats can't argue against free child care, free bus fare, making an unlivable city livable by bringing down the cost of food and rent. They can't argue against that because these are all winning policies that can be paid for simply by forcing the richest 1% in this city to pay their taxes. No, you can't argue against any of this because as budgetary items go, all of this can be done. So, if you're a tool of the ruling class, how do you combat this common sense policy that Mamdani is espousing? You remember that New York has more Jews than any city in the world. That's what you do. And as with any demographic group, some of those Jewish voters are not just incredibly gullible, they're easily frightened. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo and our current mayor, Eric Adams, 2 scandal-plagued political hacks who lost to Mamdani, they're running now as third-party candidates in November. And they can't beat Mamdani on the issue, so they are left with no choice but to scare low-information Jewish voters into believing the single biggest threat right now in New York City is anti-Semitism. Really? Okay. Now, anti-Semitism is a serious problem all around the world. And here in New York, hate crimes against Jews has doubled. There's no question it's a problem. But in New York City, which again has more Jews than any other city in the world, anti-Semitism is not our biggest problem. College kids at Columbia, NYU, or City College protesting the siege of Gaza is not anti-Semitism, especially since so many of those rallies are being held by Jews. Again, I'm not saying there isn't anti-Semitism in New York City. Hate crimes against Jews doubled this year. But anti-Semitism is as big a problem in New York City as anti-Christian bigotry is here in the United States. You know, we hear from Republicans that the most persecuted group of people in our country Christians. And why is that? Because the government is making them bake wedding cakes for homosexuals. Not exactly the Warsaw Ghetto, but knock yourself out. Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks her sect of Christianity is the most persecuted group in America because there are laws on the book preventing her from persecuting the LGBTQ community. More importantly, when it comes to claiming victimhood, it's hard to say you're scared when there are more of you than there are of them. So, not to discount anti-Semitism in New York City. There are a lot of reasons to be terrified in New York City, but not topping the list is being Jewish. In New York City, topping the list is being Black, Hispanic, being a member of the transgender community, autistic, and poor. In the hierarchy of needs, people who need to be protected and cared for to make sure our police and fellow citizens are being responsible towards these people. In New York City, we first worry about Blacks, Hispanics, the transgender community, autistic people, and the poor. And I know I left some groups out. And again, I know attacks on Jews and Muslims and the Asians are up in this city. I know that. I'm not discounting that. But you don't build a mayoral campaign by scaring Jews, by terrifying Jews because a Muslim is leading in the polls. Again, since October 7th, 2023, there have been something like 1,000 hate crimes reported in New York City against Jews. Half of them are against Jews. Again, it's a problem. But Andrew Cuomo and Mayor Adams are using those statistics to frighten Jewish voters into believing the hate crimes will only get worse if we elect a Muslim mayor like Mamdani, who would do to the Jews in New York City what Israel is preparing to do to the Palestinians right now in Gaza, which, according to the Israeli government's plan, it's all out in the open. They are now planning to round up every single Palestinian in Gaza and place them in what the Israeli defense minister compassionately calls humanitarian city, a walled-in tent community that Palestinians cannot leave until they are forcibly relocated to other parts of the Middle East in order to make room for the Trump Riviera with luxury hotels, golf courses, and manufacturing zones. This is an actual artist's rendering of the plan drawn up by the Boston Consulting Group, along with some associates of former British Prime Minister and war criminal Tony Blair. This is an actual design. This specific plan of a Trump Riviera has not been approved yet. Some members of the Trump White House and far-right members of the Israeli War Cabinet, however, are very much in support of this specific war crime. But the other plan is officially in place to round up all the Palestinians in Gaza, place them in humanitarian city, that's what they're calling it, humanitarian city, and then maybe, they're not sure about this, offer roughly $10,000 apiece to move someplace else. That part is in the development phases, the giving of the $10,000. Tony Blair's people, the Boston Consulting Group, and several hard-right Israeli business people are saying that if you invest several $billion to pay Palestinians to move out of Gaza, that will create a willingness on behalf of international investors and developers to pour money into Gaza and turn it into the next Dubai with artificial islands, world-class hotels, casinos, and restaurants. A Western paradise built on a Palestinian graveyard. Again, Humanitarian City has reportedly been approved by Benjamin Netanyahu. The particulars of what he's going to do with the Palestinians once they're trapped inside Humanitarian City remain to be worked out. Benjamin Netanyahu recently declared that as long as he is Prime Minister of Israel, there will never be a Palestinian state. He said a Palestinian state would leave the Israeli people less secure, vulnerable to more attacks like the one that happened on October 7th, 2023, where 1,200 people were killed, including 36 children, and 250 were taken hostage. Not to mention the rape and torture, which many of my listeners insist never happened. Because everyone knows that people who kill women and children and take senior citizens and babies hostage, everyone knows they draw the line at rape and torture. What happened on October 7th was the single worst killing spree of Jews since the Holocaust. Whenever I say that, I get emails from listeners who say, not true, not true. On February 5th, 1932, in the city of Bumbut, 2,000 Jews were slaughtered by a Finnish oil executive. You know, they give me, why are you sending me that? Why are you so concerned that October 7th wasn't the single worst killing spree of Jews since the Holocaust? Why are you sending that? Because you believe Israel had it coming on October 7th. You believe that what happened on October, the Israelis, the people, they deserved it. Fine. Say that. Say that. If you think Israel had it coming, you're free to believe that. But what do you think Israel's response, what do you think it's going to be after October 7th? What did you think it was going to be? Wow, maybe we should reconsider our treatment of the Palestinians. That's usually not how Israel or any nation responds to these kind of things. And Hamas knew that. Israel, whether you like it or not, is going to defend itself. Iran, whether you like it or not, is going to defend itself. The United States, whether you like it or not, is going to defend itself. Lebanon is going to defend itself. Hamas is going to defend itself. And Israel is going to defend itself. Gaza was an open prison camp before October 7th, a crime against humanity. And the world ignored their pleas. After October 7th, it pretty much no longer exists, as children are dying from malnutrition, lack of medicine, more than 50,000 dead. Some say way more than that because Hamas undercounts the casualties in order to make it look like they're still winning. Last year, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were running for president, I wouldn't blame the Democrats for the crimes in Gaza because I feared that would help Donald Trump. I don't know what the polling is, but I suspect one of the reasons Harris lost, especially in Michigan and Arizona, which both have huge Arab populations, I suspect one of the big reasons is because the Biden administration refused to stand up to Netanyahu and the Israeli lobby, AIPAC. AIPAC, which only represents the hard right in Israel, not the entire nation of Israel. AIPAC is Benjamin Netanyahu's lobbying organization. AIPAC is the equivalent of the Republican Party having its own lobbying group. So, I don't like to blame Biden or the United States, but this country had the power to stop Netanyahu from going into Gaza. And Biden told him not to. He didn't listen. If you listened to my show back then, on October 8th, October 9th of 2023, I said, don't go into Gaza. Do not squander this opportunity the same way America squandered 9/11 by going into Iraq. Remember 9/11? People in Tehran had candlelight vigils, and that war criminal, George W. Bush, squandered an opportunity by invading Iraq. Even Thomas Friedman of the New York Times said, don't go into Gaza. Use October 7th, 2023 for a higher purpose. Then again, there were 250 hostages that needed to be released, and it was felt not responding forcefully would be an open invitation to take more hostages. Well, obviously, I don't know what the solution is other than Benjamin Netanyahu is the problem. I refuse to believe that the Biden administration couldn't have done something to prevent the wholesale slaughter of innocent Palestinians, while at the same time get the 250 hostages back. I have to believe they could have done something to stop the slaughter. And I should have said that in the lead up to the election, but I didn't because I knew that it would be worse under Trump, which it is. He's calling for ethnic cleansing. Hamas launched the attack on October 7th, knowing Israel would respond the way it did, disproportionately. That's always how Israel responds, disproportionately. You kill one of ours, we kill 100 of yours. Hamas mistakenly believed the entire Middle East would rise up to protect the Palestinians after Netanyahu responded disproportionately. That was the plan. Didn't turn out that way. Hezbollah fired rockets into northern Israel. That was about it. The Houthi rebels in Yemen, they still continue to fire missiles into Israel in support of the Palestinians of Gaza. Those missile attacks are real, but it's not the entire Middle East rising up as one to voice support for the Palestinians the way Hamas had planned. Iran, which funnels money to Hamas, never came to the rescue of the Palestinians. Yes, Iran fired missiles into Israel back in 2024, but that had nothing to do with the Palestinians. That was in response to Israel attacking the Iranian consulate in Syria, killing some of Iran's top commanders. Iran's first missile attack on Israel had nothing to do with the siege of Gaza. And Iran's second missile attack last month, nothing to do with Gaza, nothing to do with the Palestinians. It was in response to Israel attacking their nuclear installations and killing their top scientists and generals. After Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, 2023, Iran said to Israel, "We had nothing to do with this." Hamas's plan on October 7th was to provoke Netanyahu into slaughtering tens of thousands of Palestinians so the true nature of the Israeli beast would finally be revealed and the entire world would come to the rescue of the Palestinians. The plan, Hamas's plan, was we provoke Netanyahu to slaughter tens of thousands of our people to save and improve the lives of millions. Who's to blame for what's going on in Gaza right now? Hamas, Netanyahu, partly Biden, and definitely Trump, who is openly calling right now for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. It has now received wisdom that Benjamin Netanyahu undermined the Oslo Accords from day one. It has received wisdom that through stochastic terrorism, Benjamin Netanyahu's virulent speeches against negotiating with the Palestinians triggered the 1995 assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who, along with PLO leader Yasser Arafat, had just won the Nobel Peace Prize for outlining a framework for a two-state solution. At Yitzhak Rabin's funeral, his wife Leah reportedly turned to Benjamin Netanyahu and said, quote, "You did this. You did this. Your hate-drenched words killed my husband." Stochastic terrorism. Yitzhak Rabin was killed by a far-right Israeli extremist who was provoked through stochastic terrorism. Many of the settlers on the West Bank honor Yitzhak Rabin's assassin. And after Yitzhak Rabin, the peacemaker, was assassinated, a year later, Benjamin Netanyahu was elected prime minister, and the hope for a two-state solution crumbled. That was in the mid to late 90s, and then the two-state solution practically disappeared after 9/11, when the United States, under George Bush, essentially abandoned the Palestinians as America began to see Israel as an ally in our fictitious war against global terrorism. Now, one of the reasons Osama bin Laden gave for attacking America on 9/11 was George W. Bush walking away from the Palestinians. It is believed that a lot of the Saudi funding for 9/11 came from disaffected members of the Saudi royal family, who believed the George W. Bush administration was drifting away from Bush's predecessor, Bill Clinton, who desperately tried to create a Palestinian state. 9/11 happened in September of 2001. You might remember in Bill Clinton's final year as president, 2000, that was 1 year before 9/11, Bill Clinton brought Yasser Arafat and then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak to Camp David. And it is generally believed this was the closest the Israelis and the Palestinians ever came to a two-state solution. The negotiations fell apart at the last minute. Then the Second Intifada rose up after Ariel Sharon provoked the Palestinians. Then George W. Bush became president. And instead of resuming negotiations with the Palestinians and Israel, George W. Bush decided to play golf. And then 9/11 happened. In the planning of 9/11, disaffected Saudi princes who funded the attacks thought they were helping the Palestinians. But it only left the Palestinians further down the list of American priorities. When Hamas launched its attack on October 7th, 2023, they thought in the long run they would be helping the Palestinians. It doesn't seem to be turning out that way. After Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, he convened a meeting of his top commanders to plot out the genocide of the Jews living in Poland. It was the beginning stages of the Warsaw Ghetto. A year later, hundreds of thousands of Polish Jews were rounded up, forced to wear white armbands and blue stars of David, and relocated into the Warsaw Ghetto, sealed off by 10-foot thick walls and barbed wires. They were forced to live on 300 calories a day. Nearly 1/3 of them died in the ghetto from malnutrition and disease. The rest were eventually shipped off to concentration camps like Treblinka, where most of them were exterminated. It is estimated 7,000 Jews, heavily armed, died during the Warsaw Uprising in April of 1943, but they were no match for the German military, and after that uprising, the Warsaw Ghetto was demolished and the entire population of Jews liquidated. So, when Hitler first broached the idea of rounding up all the Polish Jews, this was in 1939, right after the Germans invaded Poland. When Hitler broached the subject of rounding up all the Polish Jews, a couple of his top lieutenants nervously cleared their throats and politely suggested the world might frown upon this. And Hitler famously replied, "Who speaks today of the Armenian genocide? Who speaks today of the Armenian genocide?" Hitler said, "Trust me, the world will get over it. They always do." Which brings us back to the Middle East. Although peace talks between Israel and Hamas are still going on, Netanyahu says the fighting will continue until Hamas is entirely eliminated. He says there will be no Palestinian state and there will be no Hamas. Hamas has been severely weakened, and some say Palestinians living in Gaza right now want whatever is left of Hamas to get out. The best that some are hoping for is that Fatah takes over Gaza. But that ship sailed. I doubt we will ever see Israel pull out of Gaza and turn it over to Fatah, especially since too many Palestinians in Gaza resent Fatah, which is a political party whose roots go back to Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Fatah is the dominant political party inside the West Bank, not in Gaza. Fatah was originally voted into office by the Palestinians to run the Palestinian Authority inside the West Bank and Gaza. What is the Palestinian Authority? It is a vestigial organ from the Oslo Accords, where Palestinians weren't given a nation, but they were given their own government called the Palestinian Authority, basically training wheels with limited power inside the West Bank and originally inside Gaza. The Palestinian Authority still does some of the policing and other administrative duties inside the West Bank. They have a legislature and a president. The president's name is Mahmoud Abbas. But the problem is elections have not been held in 20 years, and the legislature, the parliament, has not convened in decades, with President Abbas basically ruling the West Bank by decree. He is generally considered by most to be incredibly corrupt and old. He's in his 80s. Many Palestinians view him as a quisling who refuses to stand up to the Israelis. Younger Palestinians find Hamas more attractive because Hamas is way more militant and refuses to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, and have said repeatedly they are done negotiating. Although Hamas does say now they recognize Israel's right to exist. Sometimes they say that, but it's not in their Hamas's constitution. Well, from the river to the sea, that's what Hamas believes. And so does Benjamin Netanyahu. Just different people going from the river to the sea. Parliamentary elections to fill the Palestinian Authority's 132 seats were last held back in 2006 when George W. Bush was the president of the United States. That is the last time elections were held for the Palestinian Authority. Elections were held for the Palestinian Authority, for the parliament to administer both Gaza and the West Bank in 2006. That's the last time. Back then, Fatah was the ruling majority party. It remains the ruling party, but not necessarily the majority party, because elections have not been held in 20 years. Mahmoud Abbas, the current Palestinian president, was president back then. He's been in office for decades. So, back in 2006, when they last had elections, and this is really important, Hamas ran on the change and reform ticket, and they won. They won 74 seats. Fatah, the ruling majority party, only won 45 seats. So, in a parliamentary system, President Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah party, which lost, was obligated to ask Hamas to lead a coalition government. A coalition government where Hamas would be in charge, not Fatah. A coalition government where Fatah would be asked to join the government. Some ministers from Fatah would be part of the coalition, but Hamas would be in charge. George W. Bush was president at the time, however. Bush, who was busy spreading democracy throughout the Middle East, refused to recognize Hamas's democratic victory. He said, the problem is Hamas are terrorists. The problem is that Fatah was also terrorists, or they were terrorists, until they signed the Oslo Accords. That's how these things usually work. First, you're a terrorist, then you're a political party. Benjamin Netanyahu leads the Likud party in Israel, which has its roots going back to the Irgun, a radical paramilitary organization that existed before Israel became a nation. The Irgun. The Irgun wanted the British out of Palestine, so they blew up the King David Hotel, killing 91 people, including 17 Jews. That's the Irgun. When Israel became a nation, the Irgun put down its weapons and became a political party called Herut, which eventually blended into a series of coalitions that became Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. First, you're a terrorist, then you're a political party. David Ben-Gurion, considered the George Washington of Israel, was a terrorist. His terrorist organization was the Haganah, which put down its weapons and became, I believe, the Labor Party. I believe the Haganah turned into the Labor Party. The Irgun was like Hamas. Haganah was like Fatah. And then when Israel was a nation, They put down their weapons and they fought it out in the parliament. That's how it's supposed to work. First you're a terrorist, then you're a political party. George Washington was a terrorist until he became a Federalist. Actually, he was never a Federalist. He warned against political parties, and he is the only American president who didn't belong to a political party. But his vice president, John Adams, and his Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, were Federalists after they were terrorists, while Washington's Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, from the South, first was a terrorist, then became a Democratic Republican. That was a party back then, the Democratic Republicans, which eventually became the Democrats. That's how it works. That's how it's supposed to work. Hamas won the parliamentary elections in 2006, but they were never given an opportunity to govern. They were never given an opportunity to put down their weapons and become a political party. They were never given an opportunity to go from terrorist to political party, being forced to govern, to collect the garbage, to collect taxes. Being forced to govern transforms terrorists into pragmatists. You learn the art of compromise, one would hope. It doesn't always turn out that way. Case in point, Donald Trump. Well, Hamas winning the parliamentary elections in 2006, but being denied a seat at the table, sparked a bloody civil war between Fatah and Hamas, with hundreds of Palestinians ending up dead between the years 2006 and 2007. 2006 is the last time elections were held. Hamas won. America, Israel wouldn't allow Hamas to govern. A little civil war broke out between Hamas and Fatah. And I remember people saying at the time, well, you see what's going on between the fighting, the Hamas fighting with Fatah? These Palestinians can't govern themselves. No, they held an election and you didn't like the results. You refused to recognize that Hamas had won. You didn't give Hamas an opportunity to change. Now, to this day, by the way, this is the best history lesson you're ever going to hear about the Palestinians and the Israelis. Trust me on this. I'm not trying to show you how smart I am, and I'm not trying to prove who's wrong and who's right. This is objective, nonpartisan, this is an unbiased history lesson. It is the best history lesson you're ever going to get. So, to this day, Fatah still claims constitutional authority over Gaza, even though Hamas succeeded in throwing Fatah fighters out of Gaza. And as a result, for the past 20 years, Gaza is unofficially controlled by Hamas, while the West Bank is officially controlled by Fatah. And Netanyahu loves that because he's all about divide and conquer. Help create conditions that keep the Palestinians fighting among themselves in order to prove to the world that the Palestinians are incapable of governing their own nation. Meanwhile, according to reporting from CNN, as well as the New York Times, and NPR. Benjamin Netanyahu right now is arming Hamas's rivals inside Gaza. There are rival clans inside Gaza who don't like Hamas. And Israel right now is enlisting those rival clans to help Israel defeat Hamas. Because as we all know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend until he's not. Kind of the way, where am I? Damn it. This was going so depressingly well. What's going on? Are we back? There we go. Okay. Pretend that didn't happen. You're listening to the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman. Please like this episode. It's a good one. It really is. And I know it's confusing. Rewind it, watch it again. You're getting the whole story right now. You are. Okay. So I was saying, before I was so rudely interrupted, right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, in his infinite wisdom, is arming rival clans inside Gaza, hoping to enlist them to defeat Hamas, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend until he's not. Kind of the way America armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in their war, the Mujahideen's war against the Soviets who had invaded Afghanistan. What you're looking at, is a headline from 1993 for an article written by Robert Fisk for The Independent. It's titled, "Anti-Soviet Warrior Puts His Army on the Road to Peace." And that anti-Soviet warrior who America sent weapons to kill Russians with, that anti-Soviet warrior, well, you know who he is. He turned out to be some guy named Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was the enemy of our enemy, a friend, until he wasn't. Hamas was Netanyahu's friend until it wasn't. Well, Netanyahu was never a friend to Hamas. But Netanyahu allowed money from Qatar to flow into the hands of Hamas. He openly admits this because he said a strong Hamas would weaken the dominant Palestinian Fatah party, Mahmoud Abbas, who controls the West Bank and who has been a somewhat reliable negotiating partner in furthering the two-state solution. Netanyahu never wanted a two-state solution. It was his stochastic terrorism, his speeches, that resulted in Yitzhak Rabin's assassination. Ask Leah Rabin. So Netanyahu allowed Qatar, he became prime minister, and he allowed Qatar to start sending Hamas money, thereby bolstering a much more radical element inside Gaza and the West Bank. Hamas has a presence in the West Bank. Netanyahu wanted Hamas to become the dominant Palestinian player in order to prove to Israelis a two-state solution is impossible. And then October 7th happened, which gave Netanyahu an excuse not just to evict Hamas from Gaza, but to evict the entire Palestinian population. Netanyahu now says a two-state solution is impossible because a sovereign Palestinian state leaves the Israeli population vulnerable to nonstop attacks. But look at what's happening now. Despite Israel salting Carthage, that's basically what they're doing to Gaza, despite the entire leadership of Hamas eliminated and entire villages destroyed, Hamas, or some splinter group, possibly one of the clans in Gaza Israel is arming, someone continues to fire rockets from Gaza into Israel. This month, on July 2nd, 2 rockets were launched out of Gaza and had to be shot down by the Israeli Air Force. On July 5th, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, had to shoot 2 projectiles out of the sky, fired from Gaza. On July 15th, 2 rockets fired out of central Gaza landed in Israel. Nobody was hurt. July 17th, 2 rockets launched from northern Gaza were shot out of the sky by the Israeli Air Force. On Friday, yesterday, Israel's Iron Dome shot a rocket out of the sky that had been fired from northern Gaza. I don't think Israelis are feeling particularly safe despite all the death and destruction brought on the people of Gaza, which is why the hardliners inside the Israeli war cabinet have come to believe that the only answer is humanitarian city. Humanitarian city. Clear out all of Gaza. And then, according to this magical thinking, Israel will finally be safe. You know, the way George W. Bush finally made us safe with his illegal invasion of Iraq. Ehud Olmert served as Israeli prime minister from 2006 to 2009. He calls humanitarian city ethnic cleansing. He called it not just a crime against humanity, but he went so far as to use the C word, concentration camp. That's something Jews are allowed to say in Israel, including former prime ministers, without being labeled anti-Semitic or a self-hating Jew. Because students of history know Hitler doesn't hold the copyright on concentration camps. President Franklin Roosevelt placed Japanese American citizens in concentration camps during World War II, and they were called concentration camps. Before Hitler, during the Spanish-American War, back in 1902, the United States Army, literally colonizing the Philippines, the United States Army placed guerrilla fighters in concentration camps where anywhere between 200,000 to 1 million eventually died from disease, torture, malnutrition, and murder. You think you're allowed to teach that one in Florida public schools? What do you think Indian reservations are? Concentration camps. Merriam-Webster's defines concentration camp as, quote, a place where large numbers of people, such as prisoners of war, political prisoners, refugees, or the members of an ethnic or religious minority, are detained or confined under armed guard, unquote. This is why I join so many of my brothers and sisters on the left who call Alligator Alcatraz and America's system of for-profit ICE detention centers what they are: concentration camps. That is not trivializing the Holocaust. it's preventing the next one. That's why I can't wait to vote for Mamdani again. A new Data for Progress poll shows Mamdani leading the field here in New York City with 40% of the vote. Andrew Cuomo with about 25% of the vote. And Eric Adams, our mayor, who agreed to cooperate with ICE in exchange for the Justice Department dropping its indictment, charging him with campaign finance fraud and accepting bribes from the government of Turkey, well, he is polling at 15%. Cuomo is promising to drop out of the race in September if his polling shows that he's not the strongest candidate against Mamdani. That's so he and Mayor Adams don't end up splitting the anti-Muslim vote. So far, Mayor Adams has not made the same promise. New York City has ranked choice voting for primaries and special elections, but come November, a candidate can win with just a plurality. So it looks like either Mayor Adams or former governor of New York, former disgraced governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, one of them will have to drop out in order for corrupt establishment machine Democrats to keep Mamdani out of Gracie Mansion. Cuomo has millions of dollars in dark money behind him. But New Yorkers, we're pretty smart. We're on to Andrew Cuomo. We know who Andrew Cuomo is. According to New York State Attorney General Letitia James's official 2021 investigation into Cuomo's behavior as governor of New York, Cuomo harassed 11 women while he was governor. Those are just the women who were willing to step forward. The official report from Letitia James says 11 women were harassed, but it wasn't just verbal harassment. It was groping and unwanted kissing. I call that sexual assault. Most people do. But as we learned from the E. Jean Carroll trial, New York State had unorthodox definitions of what constituted sexual harassment, sexual assault, and rape. They used to. This is why New York State Governor Kathy Hochul on January 30th, 2024, signed into law the Rape is Rape Act. This was in response to the E. Jean Carroll trial. The Rape is Rape Act. I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but the jury in the E. Jean Carroll trial, under the current law that was just passed, they would have found Trump guilty of rape instead of sexual assault. That is why the judge in the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit said the judge wrote this twice. He said a jury found Donald Trump civilly liable for rape in common law parlance. In other words, if this were another state, and I think maybe Texas and California and Illinois, the jury would have found Trump civilly liable for rape and not sexual assault. And now with the Rape is Rape Act, he would have been found in New York State civilly liable for rape. You know, ABC News, which is owned by Disney, instead of paying Donald Trump $17 million because George Stephanopoulos said Trump was found civilly liable for rape, instead of saying he was found civilly liable for sexual assault, Trump sued because of that. Instead of settling with Donald Trump, ABC News should have invested that $17 million that they gave to Donald Trump. They should have invested that $17 million into doing what I'm doing right now, which is explaining New York State's one-time distinction between sexual assault and rape to their viewers. That's what they should have done. They should have spent $17 million to explain why Donald Trump was found civilly liable for sexual assault and not rape in New York State. But he would have been found civilly liable in, I think, let's just say other states. I think Texas, I think New York, I think Texas, California, Illinois, and now New York because of the Rape is Rape Act. That's what you do, Disney. That's what you do, ABC News, instead of handing him $17 million. You should have let Donald Trump take you to court because the judge would have ordered Trump to pay your legal fees. There are slap laws against frivolous lawsuits like this. And don't get me started on Colbert and CBS. That's a whole other. Anyway. Andrew Cuomo was forced to resign as governor in August of 2021. Brittany Camiso, one of his executive assistants, filed a criminal complaint against Cuomo with the Albany Sheriff's Office. Albany is the capital of New York State. She filed a criminal complaint saying, quote, "What Andrew Cuomo did to me was a crime. Grabbing a woman's breasts without consent, that is not sexual harassment. It is sexual assault and or sexual battery." Several of Cuomo's accusers filed civil lawsuits against him. But Andrew Cuomo's lawyers were so invasive and abusive, his accusers decided to let the matter drop and move on with their lives. They figured Cuomo was forced to resign as governor. His banishment from the political stage served as vindication enough. But now he's back and running for mayor of New York City. And a few people have said to me, well, how does he find his way back? Shouldn't he be given a second chance? I say, how do the women he assaulted find their way back? I had Lindsey Boylan on this show. She's the former aide to Governor Andrew Cuomo. She's the first woman to publicly accuse him of sexual harassment. They put her through the ringer. She's since run for office here in New York City several times, hasn't won. How come nobody's worried about Lindsey Boylan's second act? I have no doubt Andrew Cuomo can find work in the private sector. But the last thing a man who clearly misused his power deserves is more power. Go find work in the private sector, Cuomo. We know for a fact he sexually harassed and groped these women. Groping is assault and battery. It's a crime. Yes, he's not a murderer, but he's also not a mayor. You don't get to be mayor. But some people have said to me, the fact that Cuomo can get away with these accusations proves he has what it takes to fight Donald Trump. So you've just given up, right? You've just given up. We're no longer a nation of laws and decency. Now we fight indecent criminals like Donald Trump by relying on other indecent criminals like Andrew Cuomo. Is that the plan? Is that how it works? And what will my indecent criminal, Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, I have to vote for him, right? What will he do for the city of New York? I get the whole he's the devil, but he's my devil line of thinking. I get that. That's what they used to say about Lyndon Johnson. So, Andrew Cuomo's my devil, right? Is he going to provide universal daycare? Is he going to freeze the rent? Is he going to build low-income housing, grocery stores to bring down the cost of food, free bus fare? No. The only thing Andrew Cuomo is doing for the city of New York is making Jews paranoid about a Muslim mayor. Who I'm voting for? Mamdani. I'm voting for him again. Mostly because of what he's promising to do for the city. Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York ran on universal preschool. Please pay attention to this because this is really important. I don't think I'm going too deep into the woods when it comes to New York City politics. Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York. He was the mayor before Adams, our current mayor. Pay attention to this. Mayor Bill de Blasio ran on universal preschool. He got elected twice, and he delivered universal preschool. See how that works, Democrats? You make a promise like universal preschool, and then you deliver. Kept his promise despite Governor Andrew Cuomo fighting de Blasio every step of the way. Andrew Cuomo was governor of New York, and he opposed universal preschool in New York City. He pulled the old, I'm for it in theory, but how do we pay for that bullshit? Not voting for Andrew Cuomo. I like Mamdani. I like him because he's 33, he's a socialist, and we need socialists to govern capitalism's world capital. We need a socialist in charge of the capital of capitalism. Call me a fool, but like President Franklin Roosevelt, I believe capitalism and socialism with the right guardrails can coexist. In fact, it already coexists here in the United States, but as my listeners already know, it's only socialism for the rich, capitalism for the rest of us. You all know that. So I'm voting for Mamdani because I think he might be able to keep some of his promises the way Mayor de Blasio kept some of his promises. It's nice to see a Democrat other than Bernie Sanders promising something. Imagine that. A Democratic candidate promising something. Billionaire Mark Cuban and billionaire wannabe Barack Obama are currently lecturing Democrats on how to win the midterms. The two men responsible for Democrats losing last November are now lecturing me on what my party needs to do to win next year. Kamala Harris, who I voted for and I would vote for again, she couldn't wait to campaign with billionaire Mark Cuban, who on the campaign trail promised there would be no wealth tax. She couldn't wait to campaign with Barack Obama, whose entire post-presidency has been devoid of marching with the workers and speaking for the truly disenfranchised. Not once have I seen Barack Obama walk a picket line outside Amazon or Starbucks. Obama is busy flying off to Italy with Steven Spielberg to catch a Bruce Springsteen concert. And Mark Cuban is a billionaire. Neither one of them are calling for Medicare for all or a wealth tax. You win elections by making promises and then trying to keep them. Universal daycare, universal preschool, free bus fare, rent freezes. You have to make people want to vote for you. Both Mark Cuban and Barack Obama are busy saying Democrats can't win simply by demonizing Donald Trump. They're absolutely right. But what they conveniently leave out is you have to promise things. The Democrats right now think a winning strategy for next year is making Trump release the Epstein files. Wrong. That's not going to win you elections. Voters know releasing the Epstein files or not releasing the Epstein files has absolutely no bearing on our future. Democrats should be pushing right now Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage, a Green New Deal. They should be the shadow government showing voters what voters would get if Democrats were in charge. Do we really need to see what's in the Epstein files? Yes, it's salacious. Is it going to help the victims? No. No. And as I pointed out on the last show, Trump is already working the chain of custody attack that Biden had the Epstein files for 4 years and he contaminated them. He slipped things into the Epstein files to embarrass Donald Trump. You have to promise people things, and you have to appeal to their better angels. In other words, you have to address the plight of those who are being left behind, the truly unfortunate. You know, Kamala Harris, who I voted for and I would vote for again, and I think she would have turned into Biden and moved to the left if we pushed her. If we pushed her, she's a politician, okay? If you push them, as Franklin Roosevelt supposedly said, although Professor Harvey J.K. says he didn't say it, but Franklin Roosevelt reportedly said to the left, make me do it. You got to make me do it. Obama used to say that to the left, make me do it. These are politicians. We have to make them do it. Kamala Harris had time to show up for the Met Gala this year, but no time to march with Bishop William Barber and his Poor People's Campaign. In October of last year, Dr. Barber sat in the audience to hear Kamala Harris campaign in North Carolina, but he wasn't asked to introduce her. He wasn't welcomed on the stage. He endorsed her, but she didn't use him. She used Oprah. She used Liz Cheney, but not Dr. Barber, because the Democratic leadership is unwilling to address real poverty. Half this country is either suffering from real poverty, on the brink of real poverty, or terrified of real poverty. This Democratic Party, going back to Jimmy Carter, has stopped promising to tackle real poverty. Instead, they promise to create opportunities for everyone to succeed. Opportunities doesn't mean you're going to have basic human dignity, but you're going to have an opportunity for human dignity. F opportunity. I need a roof over my head. I need free and or affordable food, free health care, free education, clean air, clean water, among other things. I don't want the police to do jobs that need to be performed by social workers. When someone is in a mental health crisis, when an autistic individual needs compassion, the last person you should be sending to de-escalate the situation is a guy with a gun. Look, I'm not running for office, so I'll say it. Defund the police. And how do you defund the police? You get the assault rifles off the streets. You get rid of the assault rifles, then you don't need weapons of war for our police. Fewer prisons, more teachers and social workers. Don't talk to me about an opportunity economy. Most Americans don't want an opportunity to be as successful as Kamala and her husband, as Michelle and Barack, as Hillary and Bill. Most Americans want basic human dignity. Talking about an opportunity economy is the height of condescension and elitism. It's saying, hey, you can have what I have, and I want to give it to you. I want to give you that opportunity. I don't want what Bill Clinton and Barack Obama or Mark Cuban have. I don't think being wildly successful is particularly healthy, and I suspect it takes a major toll on your family as well as your moral compass. I don't aspire to lead Mark Cuban's life. He's a lucky creep. And until the Democratic Party embraces basic human dignity for all people, which means free education, free health care, affordable and or free housing, food stamps, social workers, free mental health care, and clean air and water, they will never defeat the faux populism MAGA Republicans are selling right now. So, kindly get the F out of the way, Mark Cuban and President Obama. I like President Obama. I do. But he's irrelevant now. He's irrelevant. Go away, Andrew Cuomo, who Bill Clinton endorsed for mayor. The Democratic Party will be accused of being radical socialists no matter who they nominate. So we might as well elect one. And like Franklin Roosevelt, remind voters what a real social safety net feels like, especially now, as Republicans just passed a budget that amounts to the largest attack on our social safety net in American history. Another reason I'm voting for Mamdani is because he's Muslim. You can't call yourself a person of faith unless you have faith in all faiths, faith in all people, and faith in your country. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo, with all his dark money, is cutting new campaign commercials. This is an ad in a trade magazine for actors calling for a white actor to star in Andrew Cuomo's next commercial. This is how it reads. Top New York production company seeking, quote unquote, gentrifier young white men, Manhattan. Tusk Strategies, in association with Bulldog Strategies and Allegory LLC, is looking for actors to fill the non-speaking role of gentrifier young white men in the political relaunch ad for a top candidate in a nationally significant race set in the streets of Manhattan. The role will have this non-unionized actor interact personally with the candidate in a friendly manner, broadening the candidate's appeal to a younger demographic. That's for Andrew Cuomo. He's looking for a white male gentrifier in order to appeal to the people everybody in New York City hates. Gentrifiers, white men, gentrifiers. Non-union actor. They specify. If you're union, Andrew Cuomo won't hire you. As far as I'm concerned, that automatically disqualifies Andrew Cuomo. Non-union actor. Unbelievable. Tucker Carlson, who's made a fortune stoking hatred against Muslims, appeared at the Turning Point Conference in Tampa to complain about Muslims. Specifically, Mamdani. He's terrified that Mamdani is going to take over New York City. Here is the odious Tucker Carlson.
Why are my cities disgusting? I don't want to go there. It smells like weed and halal food.
Weed and halal food. I agree with Tucker about the weed. I mean, come to New York City for the contact high. The entire city. Again, people should, I have no problem with people smoking dope, but I don't think, anyway, halal food. Tucker's upset because the city smells of halal food. You mean no pork? No pork byproducts? You might want to try that, Tucker. Animals treated and slaughtered in a humane way? Is that what you're talking about? You don't like halal food? Interesting. Here in New York City, near Radio City Music Hall on 6th Avenue, at any given time of day, there is a line literally 1 block long as New Yorkers wait patiently to buy from a halal food truck. Now, why would a city with the largest population of Jews in the world, why would that city have a line going all the way around the block to be served Muslim food, pork-free, food slaughtered in accordance with the Quran? Because that food is kosher. That's why. Because New York is its own religion. When you throw 10 million people from all over the world onto an island, they quickly discover we share 99.9% of the same identical DNA. Living in a big city teaches you how to build community and trust other humans. No lasting advances in civilization were ever made by people who believe in survival of the fittest. The basic building block of all civilization is getting along with and taking care of your neighbor, which also happens to be a winning political message. Democrats should try it and then tell Mark Cuban to go F himself. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you to Bob and Mila for keeping the conversation civil in the chat room. Thank you to the people watching me live right now. I have erratic hours. It takes me a long time to research some of these shows, and it's not ready till it's ready. I do feel, though, that if you're trying to understand what's going on in New York City with the race in November and what's going on in Gaza, I feel I did an excellent job You may have to rewind it. You may. I know keeping track of who's Hamas and who's Fatah, and who Yitzhak Rabin is and who Netanyahu is. These are not familiar names, but you won't get a better objective layout of the situation. You won't. I promise you. I don't usually toot my own horn, but somebody's got to toot it. I may get a rib removed. That's how desperate I am. I'm thinking of getting one of my ribs removed so I can toot my own horn. Yeah, it's tough right now, so I'm tooting. Thank you for listening. Leave a comment. Stay in touch. Share this with people who want to learn about New York City and the Middle East. Hit the like button so I remain in your feed. A lot of people tell me they can't find the show. Gee, I wonder why. Wonder why people are having trouble finding my show. Hit the notification bell if that often helps. Even my audio podcast now is hard to find. Yeah, I'm going to get a rib removed and just start tooting myself. Okay, I'm not giving up. I don't give up. I don't care if I have one listener. I'm not giving up. Because I know right from wrong. Maybe a show tomorrow. Thank you.